What's going on, guys? So it's been a while since I did any kind of little vanilla JavaScript project, and I know that a lot of you guys like these projects, especially those of you that are sort of in the beginner range. So we're going to build this product filtering UI with Tailwind and vanilla JavaScript, and this was actually just added to my 20 vanilla projects course. So if you want to check that out, you have a bunch of projects here, some demos. So I'll leave that link in the description. But basically, we're going to create the layout with Tailwind, and we're going to add some functionality here where we can click Add to Cart, and it'll increase this cart number right here. So you can say I'll add that one, the Xbox, and then of course, if it's added, I can then click Remove from Cart. So that'll be the first thing we do. Then we're going to filter based on categories. So if I select cameras, it's only going to show me the cameras. Smartphones, it'll show me, cameras and smartphones. And then we can also search products from here. So if I start to type play, you'll see PlayStation, Sony. Now, one thing we're going to do is make it so if one of these are checked, like cameras, and you search here, it's only going to search what is checked off. So notice the PlayStation isn't showing because I have cameras checked off. If I check games, then the PlayStation will show. All right, so yeah, it's a simple project in terms of functionality, but I think that it'll help you out with your vanilla JavaScript skills, especially when it comes to things like high order array methods and so on. All right, and this is the code pen. I'll have the link in the description. I'll also have the link to the vanilla web projects repository, and you can find this project. Well, where is it? Right here, product filtering, and this is where you can get the images as well. All right, so let's get started. All right, guys, so I have the final project open here so we can kind of use it as a reference and I can explain what we're doing. And we're going to do this from scratch, so that means typing out the HTML with the Tailwind classes. And I know some of you might not be interested in that, so I'll have the timestamps so you can just jump right to the JavaScript if you want. But you guys that know how I do things, I like to just start from absolute scratch. Now, I do have a blog post on my website as well. If you want to get any of the code from here, we're going to grab the array from here because I don't want to type out all these products. So we will do that. But yeah, I have VS Code open, and I just have a product filtering UI folder with an images folder with all the images. And you can get the images from multiple places, either from the repository, from the code pen. You could even get it from this, vanilla web projects demo site. Or if you just want to use your own images, that's fine too. Okay, so that's all I have here. So let's create an index.html to work with, and let's also create a script.js. And we're going to I'll just close this up. We'll go to our index.html, and let's create a boilerplate. I'm just going to say text store for a title. Now, since we're using Tailwind, we do want to include the CDN. So if you go to Tailwind CSS and go to docs and click on play CDN, you can just grab the script tag here, and we can close that up and then just put that in the head. All right, and then we'll just put hello here, and then I'm going to be using the live server extension. So I'm going to say open with live server, and there we go. All right, now, like I said, we're going to do all the HTML, all the Tailwind stuff, and I'm going to kind of explain the Tailwind classes as we go, just for those of you that are new to Tailwind. So let's start off with the body, because we do want to have that dark gray background. So we're going to have BG, let's say BG-gray, and we're going to do 800, and we're going to make all the text white. So use the text white class. Okay, so inside the body, we're going to have the nav. So basically what we're going to do is build this first, the nav, which is responsive. So as you can see, it starts as a flex column and then turns into a flex row. Same with the sidebar and the main area here, as well as the columns. So it will be responsive. So let's add the nav tag here, and we're going to do BG-gray 900 for that. I'm going to add a little bit of padding, so P4, and then margin bottom we'll do 6. And then inside that, let's have a class of container, because we don't want the navbar to extend all the way on both sides. So we'll do a max width of 6XL, And let's move everything to the middle with MX Auto. We're going to use Flexbox here, and we're going to, like I said, make it a flex column to begin with. And we'll add some spacing with gap 8. And then let's align items center with items center. Okay, now where we have flex column, I'm also going to add on small breakpoints and up, then I want it to turn into a flex row. Okay, and then inside the div, we're going to have a search area, and we're also going to have the cart icon. So those are the two things that we want to create here. So for the search, let's create, let's do a div to wrap everything in. I'm going to give it a class of relative. That will just position it relative, and then width full or W full. And that will have an input. I'm going to give it an ID of search, which we'll use in the JavaScript. For classes, we'll do BG gray 700, and then rounded dash full. Let's do padding 2. Let's do padding on the left 10. And then I'm also going to add focus, because when I click inside of it, I want it to extend. So I'm going to do width full on focus. All right, so if we take a look at that, you can see when I click in here, it extends all the way. All right, and let's actually add a placeholder as well. We'll just say search products. Okay, and then I want to have the little search icon inside of it. Now that's an SVG, so I'm just going to paste that in, and again, you guys can just copy it from the code pen or whatever. And it does have a few classes. It's absolute within this relative div, and then this is the positioning, left 2, top half. And we also added a translate on the y-axis to put it where it's supposed to be. Okay, so now we have the little search icon. Now for the cart icon, so right here, we're going to have a div. Again, this is going to be relative, and we're also going to just align text center. And then the SVG for that, I'm going to paste in, which is the little cart icon. Okay, so now you can see we have the little cart. And then underneath the SVG is where we want to have that little red circle with the number of items in the cart. I'm going to use a small tag for that and give it an ID of cart-count. Okay. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention is that the code between the code pen and what I'm doing here is a little bit different than the code from the repository that has to do with the course. It's the same functionality. It's just some of the classes are named different. Some of the, like this ID, I believe is camel case in the repository, but I changed some things up just to be more consistent and make it a little cleaner. So I just want to mention that. So cart count, then we're going to have some classes like BG red 500. Okay, we want it to be a red circle, so we're also going to add rounded dash full. Then let's do text. I'm going to make it extra small, and then text dash, excuse me, text dash white. And let's see, we want it to be positioned absolute. And then for the positioning, we'll do after absolute minus top dash 2, and then minus right dash 2. And then we'll put a 0 in between the small tags. Okay, that's not right. What am I missing? I think I'm missing the width and height. So right here, I'm going to put W-4 and H-4. And that should, yeah, so that looks good. All right, and that's it for the navbar. Now we want to do the main area, so this right here, which will have the sidebar and will have the main products. So let's go under the nav. All right, and we're going to use a main tag to wrap everything here. I'm going to use Flexbox. We're going to start off with a flex column, and we'll do MX auto, container, and max width. For this, we're going to do 6XL. All right, and then I just want to make this responsive by adding on medium breakpoints and up, then we want to do a flex row. Okay, so in that main, then we'll have the div for that wraps around all the categories. That we're going to do space dash Y4. That just adds some space on the Y between all the elements on the Y axis. Padding dash 2. Let's do width full, and we're we're also going to add in a max width here, but I'm going to make it absolute. So I'm not going to use like 6XL or 4XL. I'm going to put brackets here, and we can put in any value we want. We're going to do 10 rem. Okay, then we're going to have two headings. So this one will do H2 and text-2XL and say category, sorry, not category, filters. And then underneath that, we'll do an H3 with text XL, and that will be category. Okay, so if you want to add some other filters here in the future, you can do that as well. Now, we'll have an ID of filters-container, which we'll use in our JavaScript. And then let's do a class of text-XL and a class of space-y2 just to add some space in between each one. So each category will have a div with an input. That input is going to have a class of check, and it's going to have an ID of whatever the category is, in this case cameras. And make sure you change this to checkbox. All right, and then label underneath is also going to have, for the for attribute, cameras, and then cameras inside here as well. So it should look like this. All right, now we're going to take this div, and we want 4 of these because there's 4 categories, and we just want to change the names here. Now, a little tip, I'm going to just hold shift and grab this cameras and then do Command or Control D. That selects the next one, and then again for the next one, and I'm going to change it to smartphones. Now, notice how I kept the casing, so small s, large s. The reason it did that is from an extension that I use called Multiple Cursor Case Preserve. All right, so if you guys don't know about this, it's a very handy small extension. It makes it so you don't have to go back and change all the cases when you do something like that. So it comes in handy. So the next one is, what's the next one? Games. Okay, so we'll do games, and then let's do the last one, which is going to be, what is this one? This is televisions. Oops, we want to select all of these. So televisions, okay, and then it should look like this. All right, so now we want the products wrapper, which is going to go under the last div here, still within the main tag. So products wrapper. Now, ultimately, this div that we're going to create is going to be empty inside because the products are going to come from JavaScript, right? We're going to put them in there, much like what would happen with React or any framework that is like a single page application. But for now, we'll just hard code some products just to kind of make sure it looks okay before we jump to our JavaScript. So let's do a div with the ID of products-wrapper, and then we'll do some classes here. So we want width full. We're going to do a max width of 4XL. We're going to do MX-auto, and then we're going to use the grid classes here. So grid, and then grid calls 2 to begin with. And then for gap, let's see, we'll do 6. And we're going to add place content dash center, and then for padding we'll do 4. Now, if it's larger than a certain size, the screen, I want it to have more columns. So let's put right here small colon, then we'll do grid dash calls dash 3, and then on extra large we'll do grid calls 4. All right, and like I said, this will be how it is in the end because we're not going to have anything in here, but for now we'll hard code our products. Now before I forget, let's just add right above the body here, let's do script, source, and we just want to point to our script.js. All right, so within this div, we're going to add some hard-coded products. We won't do all of them, we'll just do like 3. So each one is going to be wrapped in a class of item, and then we're also just going to do some spacing, so space y2. All right, so this is the first item. We're going to have a div with the class of bg-gray, and let's do 100, so very light. We're going to use flexbox. We're going to justify to the center. We're going to make this relative because we're going to position the add to cart button within it. and then overflow hidden, and let's do, we're going to add the class of group, and I'll show you why in a couple minutes. We're going to make the cursor a pointer when we hover over it. What else do we want? Let's do border, and then I'm going to make it rounded dash XL. Okay, and what we're talking about is this right here, okay, around the image. So within that div, obviously we want the image. So let's say img, and then we're going to give this a width full. We're going to do height or h dash full, and then we're going to do object dash cover for the image class. And then for the source, let's just do slash images, and then this is going to be the PlayStation. And let's just make sure that shows up. Okay, there it is. Now, the button is going to go in here, the add to cart. So let's say button. I'm going to give this a class of status because we're going to be changing it based on the status, based on if it's in the cart. It'll either say add to cart or remove from cart. So status is not a Tailwind class. And then let's do bg-black. We're going to do text-white. Position it absolute within the relative div. The positioning will be bottom 0, left 0, and right 0. So we're basically sticking it to the bottom. And then text-center. Let's do padding on the y-axis 2. And the way this is going to work, because we want it to be hidden to begin with, and then when we click on it, we want it to slide up. So what we can do is add the class of translate-y-full. And what that does is it'll bring it out of view. It'll basically push it down. And then I want to add a transition, which will make it smooth if I decide to animate it. All right, so let's say add to cart inside. And now if I go to the page, we can't see it because I use translate y full. So basically it's down here. So what I want to happen is when I hover over this image, I want it to pop up. So I want to change that translate y to 0, which is its original position. So what we can do is say group hover, because remember I used that group class. So now when I hover over this element, then whatever I put here will happen. And what I want to happen is translate y 0, which just puts it in its original position. So now if I hover over it, there it is. It comes up to its original position. So, I mean, Tailwind is so powerful that all the stuff you can do without having to write any CSS at all, 0. So underneath that, let's see, we're going to go under this div. Then we're going to put a paragraph, and I'm going to use text XL here, and this will be the product name. So we'll say PlayStation 5, not 6, at least not yet. And then let's do a strong tag, and we'll put the price. Oh, PlayStation 6 probably will be 4,000. And that's it. So now I'm just going to copy that item, so this item class, this item div, and we'll just do 2 more for now, just to make sure it looks okay. So we'll paste those 2 in. Let's see, for the next one, we'll do Samsung Galaxy, and we'll change this to Samsung Galaxy. And price doesn't really matter, we're not keeping this. And then this one, what do we want next? We'll just do Sony A7, which is a great camera, by the way. So Sony A7 camera. Okay, so let's make sure, yep, those look good. Okay, if I make it smaller, so this would be 4 because it's extra large, then 3, and then on smaller, it'll be 2. And you can mess with the classes if you want, to change up the grid and the columns. But that's pretty much it. Our HTML is done. So now we can jump into our script.js, the fun part. Now we do need our data. So that's the first thing I want to get. And we can get that from the blog post or any of the code resources, the code pen, the repository. Although I would suggest the code pen or this, because in the repository this is called type instead of category. So we want to make sure we're on the same page here. So let's grab those and paste that in. Now, in a real life project, this would most likely come from some kind of API that's connected to a database. But for now, we're just going to use hard-coded products. And I might continue this. I might even do a React version or a Svelte version and, create some kind of back-end API. If that's something you guys are interested in, let me know. So next, as you can see here, we're going to select the DOM elements. So let's come down under the products and we'll say select DOM elements. So let's get the products wrapper. So products wrapper, and that's an ID. So we can say document, and you can use either query selector. I'm going to use get element by ID, and that has an ID of products dash wrapper. All right, so we'll copy that down a few times. Then we want the checkboxes, which are the categories. So let's say checkboxes. Now, there's multiple checkboxes, so we're going to use query selector all here. And we want to select all of the classes of check. Then after that, we want to get the filters container. So let's say filters container, and that has an ID of filters dash container. Okay, and then we also want the search input. So let's call this search input, and I believe, yeah, that's an ID of search. So we use get element by ID, and then one more thing we need is the cart count. So cart count, and that has an ID of, I believe it's cart dash count. So we have our DOM elements. Now I'm going to initialize the cart item count, which is going to be, that number up in the corner. So we're going to use let here because we'll change it later on. So let's say cart item count. Don't call it cart count because that's what we called the element. And we're going to set that to 0 to begin with. Then we also want to initialize the product element array, which is going to be an array of basically those divs, the class of item and all the stuff inside. So let's call this product elements and set that to an empty array. Then we want to loop over the products and create an element for each one. So let's take our products and let's use for each, and let's say for each product, then we're going to want to create an element. And just to test this out and make sure that we're getting our product, let's do that and come back over here. And if I open up the console, you should see all the objects in the products array. All right, so to create an element, let's create a variable here called product element, and then we're going to use document.createElement, which will do just that, create an element for the DOM, and we want it to be a div, so we're going to pass in div. Now we can continue to add on to this element whatever we want, and what we're building is this, okay, this div to the ending, right, this item with space y2 and then everything within it. So what we'll do is add this parent div's classes. So let's say product element, and then we'll do dot class name, and we're going to set that to item and space dash y dash 2. Okay, so now we have the div that has the classes on it. And if we console log product element, just so you can see exactly what we have so far, it's a div for every product we have with these two classes. Now I want to fill in inside that div, so I'm going to do product element dot inner HTML, and I'm going to set that to some backticks, right? Because we want to be able to use template literal with some variables. So let's copy. We want to copy not the div with the item, but everything within that. So everything in between. It doesn't matter which one you choose. So just let's grab all this, So basically from this div, the BG gray, to the strong. And then we're going to paste that in here. All right, and then let me just push, I'll push those over a little bit. Okay, now we need to make this dynamic, right? Or we don't want for all of our products to show the PlayStation image and the PlayStation title, whatever. So we have access to each product in this for each, in that array. So for the image, let's get rid of this hard-coded image here. And let me see, does it have, yeah, so the URL does have images / in it, so we don't need to include that. So down here, let's get rid of that. Let's use our money sign and curly braces, and let's say product.url. Probably should have called that image, but whatever, it's fine. And then for the alt, let's use the product.name. And then we want to come down to the actual product name right here, PlayStation 5, change that to product.name. And then here we have the price, keep the money sign, and let's say product.price. And let's actually add on to this to locale string, because that will make it so that, you know, the comma will be put in there for the thousands. And then let's see, we're going to go underneath that string that we just created, and then let's take the product elements, which is the array, and let's push onto that the product element that we just created. Okay, and then we want to take the products wrapper and we want to use append child, because what we're doing is taking the product elements array, the product element, and we're putting it into the products wrapper. And this is going to run for every product we have because it's running within the for each. So in here, we're going to pass in product element. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. And now if we look at our project, we should see all the products. Now, why are there two? Oh, so we have all the products from the array through the JavaScript, but we still have the 3 hard-coded. So we can now get rid of those. So this product wrapper should be empty now. So that ends here. So I'm just going to take everything within the products wrapper and just delete it. So now, yeah, so now we should have just these, 12 products. All right, so we have our products displayed. Let's refactor this a little bit because it's a bit messy just having this loop here. So what we'll do is just create a function underneath. Let's say create product element. So function create product element, and that's going to take in the actual product object. And then what we want to put in here is, let's see, this. So we're creating product element, adding the class name, and then adding the inner HTML. So we want those things. We're going to cut, and we're going to put those in this function. And then down at the bottom, all we're going to do is then return the product element. So now up here inside the loop, we can make this, much cleaner by just setting const product element, set that equal to create product element, and just pass in the product. So if we save that, we should see the same result. Now, obviously, none of the functionality is working here, but we have our products on the screen. If I add something else to this array or remove something from the array, it's going to get add or removed from our products here. So the next thing I want to do is the add and remove to cart, or the update cart, I should say. So for that, we're going to need an event listener on this button. So remember, that button is in this HTML right here, and it has a class of status. So what I'm going to do is go into this create product. I'm going to go right above the return, and then let's take the product element, and we want to use query selector, and I'm going to select the class of status, and then let's add an event listener, and we want to listen for a click, and then we're going to call a function called update cart. Okay, and then we'll put that down here. Let's say add or remove item from cart. So function update cart. We're going to pass in our event object. Since this is being fired off on an event listener, we have access to this object. Now I want to create a status element. We'll just call this status L, or we'll call it element. So, well, maybe we should stick to, what did I use in the, let me just see what I used in the blog here. Yeah, status L. So we'll do that. So status L, and we're going to set that equal to that event object and then the target property. That'll give us the actual element that we click on. So if I do a console log of status L, and let's open up console here. If I click on this button, you'll see it actually shows me that button that I clicked on. Now we want to check to see if that has a class of added, because what's going to happen is when we click that, we're going to dynamically add a class of added. So let's say if that status element, and then we can use the class list property, and we can then say if it contains, so there's a method called contains that'll search for a class. If it has the class of added, that means it's already added, and if we're clicking it, then we want to remove it. So we'll say remove from cart, and then else, then we want to add to cart. Now there's a few other things we want to do besides adding and removing from cart. We want to change the text here. Okay, so if I add it, it should be changed to remove from cart. I also want to change the color of the button to red. So let's start here with the remove. Actually, let's start with the add. And we'll say status L and class list. And we're going to add a class dynamically through our JavaScript. And the class we want to add is added. Okay, then we want to change the text. So let's say status L dot, and we can take inner text, and we'll set that to remove from cart, right? So if I try this out right now, if I click it, now it says remove from cart. It's not toggling. I can't do anything else because I haven't added that yet, but at least we know we can click it, we can change the text. Now for the color, let's first remove, let's say status L, and then we're going to remove the current color. So class list dot remove, and it has a color of BG-gray-800. So we want to remove that. Then we want to add, so class list dot add BG red, and let's do 600. So now if I add to the cart, now it changes to the red. So now we want to do the remove, which is going to be very similar. So we can actually just copy these, and then let's change this to remove the added class. Let's change the inner text back to add to cart. Let's see, we're going to add, actually I'm going to move this here, and then let's remove the red class, and let's add the dark gray class back. So now I can toggle the button text and color. And then all we have to do to actually increase the cart count is to, if we're removing, then we want to decrement. We'll say cart item count minus minus. That'll take away 1. If we're adding, then we say cart item count plus plus. All right, then we want to change the actual count, because right now that's just going to change the variable, right? If I click this, it doesn't do anything up here. So let's go under the if statement, and let's say update cart item count. And we can do that by taking the element, the cart count element, changing the inner text to the cart item count, and I'm just going to add on to this toString. So now if I click on add to cart, now you can see now it has a 1. I'll click add to cart here, now it's 2, 3, and if I click remove, it goes back to 2, 1, and 0. All right, so pretty simple. Now we come to the filter products. So remember, we want to filter based on the category check and searching. And I'm not going to have two separate functions for that. We'll have one single function to do this. We do need two event listeners, so let's put those up top here. So we'll go right here, and let's say event listeners for filtering. Okay, so we have the filters container, so we're going to add an event listener for that, and this is a checkbox, so we're going to listen for the change event, not click, change. Then we'll call a function called filter products, which we don't have yet. Then we'll copy that down, and then we're going to have the search input. We'll add an event listener onto that, and the event we want to listen for on that is an input. All right, now we need to create this filter products. So let's come down to the bottom, and let's filter products. We'll say by checkboxes and search input. So function filter products. Okay, now I'm going to first get the search term. You don't need to put these comments in if you don't want to, but they help some people. So const search term, and the way we get that is by taking the search input. It's a text box, so we want to get the value. I'm also going to trim any white space, and I'm also going to set it to lowercase to avoid any case conflicts. And then let's also get, we'll say get, I guess, checked categories. So for that, let's say const checked categories, and we're going to, first of all, turn that checks right here. So let me just show you real quick. So we have check boxes, right? Actually, I think I called it checks. Did I? No, check boxes. All right, so we're getting all of the check boxes. So it's not returning, we're not getting a single element like we are with the rest of these. With query selector all, it gives us basically an array of our checkboxes. It's called a node list. So I want to turn that into an actual array, and we can do that with array.from. So let's say array.from, and then we can pass in checkboxes, and then we're going to add on to this dot filter. Okay, and we want to filter, pass in a callback function here. So filter each check where it's actually checked, and there's a property called checked that we can check for. I know I just said check like 15 times. All right, so that'll give us all the checked categories. In fact, why don't we do a console log here, and we'll just show what is in checked categories. So if I open up the console and I click on cameras, let's see, cannot read properties of null, reading trim. What is that? That should just be value. All right, so if I click cameras, now we get input cameras. Now smartphones check. Okay, so it's just putting whatever one is checked into this variable. Now, I don't want an array of these like input, ID, cameras. I don't want that. I just want it to be the ID, which is the actual category name. So we can add on to that filter. So let's get rid of that, and let's add on to that a map, which will take an array, and we can basically reconstruct it into an array of something else. So we'll pass in each check, and what we want to return is simply the ID, so check.id. So now, if I click on cameras, I get an array with cameras, smartphones, games. Okay, so that's exactly what I want. Now, next thing we're going to do, we can get rid of that, is let's loop over the products and check for matches. So we're going to take, I should say, our product elements. So product elements, and then for each, and we'll say for each, let's say for each product element, and then I also want to get the index, which you can get with for each, if you pass in a second argument. And then we're going to say const product and set that to products, and then whatever the index is, which will start at 0 and then, increment. So we want to check to see if the product matches the search or the checked categories. So let's say const matches search term. So we're going to check that first. So const matches search term, and we can do that by taking the product. Let's get the name, because that's what we're matching. If we're searching in the box, we're trying to match the name of the product. We're going to make it two lowercase, and then we want to use includes, because that will basically search it if whatever we pass in here is included in the search term. What we want to pass in is the actual search term, which is this right here, whatever we're putting in the input box. All right. Now let's do the categories. So we'll say const is in checked category. And first we're going to check to see if the length is equal to 0, because if it is, that means nothing's checked. That means we want to show everything. So let's say if checked categories dot length, let's say if that is equal to 0, or checked categories dot includes, and then we want to pass in whatever the current product is, the category. All right, so that will show us the matches. Now all we have to do is show or hide the product based on the matches. So we can say if matches search term, and if is in checked category, then we want to, let's say, product.classList, because with Tailwind you can add a hidden class, and that will basically set it to display none. So we want to say ClassList.remove the class of hidden, because it's matched, right? If this is true, that means there's a match. That means we want to remove hidden. Else, if there's not a match, then we can add the class of hidden, and that should do it. So now let's check cameras. Okay, so that's not working. Let's see. I'm sorry, this should be product element, not product. All right, let's try that. Cameras, there we go. Games. Okay, showing me the games, television, smartphones. All right, and then let's check this. So if I type in play, there we go. If I have cameras checked and I type in play, it shouldn't match because I'm checking cameras. If I do Sony, that does match because cameras is checked. And that's it. So, I mean, pretty simple. Let me know if you guys want me to do this same project in React, or I could do Svelte, or even like Solid.js, one of the newer frameworks. I could do that as well. I think it's a nice little project to really just kind of practice, practice your vanilla JavaScript just dealing with the DOM basically. So that's it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Again, the code will be in the description. The 20 projects course. If you like this, if you enjoyed this project, there's 19 more in that course. We also have the 50 projects course, which are the projects are a little smaller, and some of them are just HTML and CSS, but it's good practice. So you can check that out if you want. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you soon.